So I'll just introduce myself first. My name is Rhett Harmon, and I'm the GIS Asset Management Team Lead here at Marshall, and I've been working at Marshall for over 16 years. Pass it over to Elizabeth.
Hello, it's Elizabeth Marshall, CEO of MarshallGIS.
And since we have such a large group, we're not going to introduce everyone, but this is just to give you an idea of some of the attendees today from all over the U.S. and Canada, both on East Coast, West Coast, and so good group of folks here. So appreciate again you attending this webinar.
So I'm just going to do a couple of slides, and then Red is going to do the rest of the PowerPoint and a demo. But I thought I'd just explain a little bit about what we're doing, what we've done. So since '94 and ongoing through today, we're a Esri Silver partner. We are doing Esri GIS development and strategic consulting around the U.S. and also Canada, and I guess we've worked a little in Malaysia. But on top of that, in 2001, we started to write commercial code, both for ourselves under the name GeoKNX and also for folks like Infor Hansen, in integrating GIS data with work order data and asset management data. And then we went ahead and integrated GeoKNX Mobile and GeoKNX, some other back office GeoKNX products with Lucity and Maximo. Now we're a partner with CityWorks and are at that conference this week. And I'm forgetting one. Hansen, Lucity, Maximo.
One Hansen.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then in 2013, because the machine-to-machine market space is just growing so nicely, we've grown into this new product, LEGO, that's a cloud-based solution. So that's what we've been up to for the last 20 years. Early on, we worked with what was Hansen at the time, the development of GeoAdministrator, and we've maintained that on and off over the years as they ask us to. As a result, we're experts in Hansen 7 and 8 and the APIs that communicate with Hansen 8. And then we've been an Esri partner before there was a formal partner program. So mobile is an interesting product. It's a very rich product, and it can be very streamlined to your workflow. We have about 50 customers out there across the U.S. and Canada, and Malaysia, Malaysia Water. So Brett's really going to dive into GeoKNX Mobile, which is just a little workhorse out there. It's been tested, taken a lot of field workers' feedback, and improved it over the years. There are other products we have. There's GeoKNX Sync and Toolbox, which are back office tools that really streamline your maintenance of Hansen data with GIS data. And then our product LEGO is somewhat related in that we can push data from LEGO based on vehicles or assets and how much time is spent where. We can actually use part of our GeoKNX mobile software to push data to auto-populate, for example, your Hansen data. But today's meeting really is going to be focused on GeoKNX Mobile.
So the whole title of this presentation is Why GeoKNX Mobile for Hansen. So that's the primary piece of this. And so let's start with the problem. So there's a number of problems out there in terms of that when we first started building GeoKNX Mobile back in, actually the design phase was in 2003, 2004 when we started working with a customer that wanted maps and Hansen out in the field. But some of the key things are connectivity is still intermittent. We are getting more wireless connectivity, but even there are still spots that lose connection outside of the perimeters and in certain areas. Operations and GIS is still, when I say operations, I mean those that are doing, say, work orders and service requests. They're going out and actually working on hydrants and doing preventative maintenance activities. And when I'm saying GIS, I'm saying those that are doing mapping functions, going out and collecting and inventorying assets are a lot of times still working separately in their own groups. And then the other thing is Hansen and ESRI, for those that are, in terms of field users, are fairly complicated to bring out to the field in a lot of cases. The training that's required to get them up to speed on, say, some of the ESRI-based tools or Hansen interface itself is really not designed for field use. And then a lot of customers that we're talking to have a large amount of backlog and bottlenecks of getting the information back into the system so that they can quickly figure out what's been done, what's left to do, and regarding those assets that need to be updated and those sort of things. So those are some of the problems that we've been hearing over the years, and they continue to still be problems in a lot of cases. And so, what is the truth? What's the truth out there? That's a lot of times what happens when you have some of those problems. You don't know, on my map it says this, and on my Hansen asset it says this. When I'm out in the field, my maps are a lot of times maybe out of date. I don't have the most accurate information. So that's the key part of having integrated and having, anything that's you're working on in the field is spatially related. It's an asset, and you need to do work on that. And so those things need to be up to date. And so in working with a lot of customers, they're at different levels. The top level here is essentially no integration. So they're going out and they're working in silos. A lot of customers are they're in the field doing mobile work, but everything's paper-based, whether it be paper maps, paper work orders. Others that we encounter, they do have digital work orders that they're using, but then they're using either paper maps or PDF maps or those sort of things. For those that you just joined, could you please mute your phone? I appreciate it. Thank you. And then others are, again, doing GIS edits. So they're doing edits, but they're not, again, they don't have any insight into, of course, the Hansen system, which is the work management system. So the last one really is the key thing, is the bidirectional synchronization of not only your work orders, but also your assets and your infrastructure as it relates to Hansen and GIS. So it's the concept of a smarter mobile. So again, a lot of cities out there, they have maybe mobile GIS that they're working on, but they have no integration into what's going on in Hansen, or vice versa. They have Hansen in the field, but they have no real good tie to the GIS, and again, that user friendliness of having the map. So that's the whole reason why GeoKNX Mobile is essentially a smarter mobile, bringing both the map and Hansen out to the field, being able to be disconnected, intermittent connected, and being able to complete work in the field is the key thing with GeoKNX Mobile. So that leads into GeoKNX Mobile. Again, it's an asset work management solution for the field. So the core components to this is there's really three core components to GeoKNX Mobile. The top piece is the mobile client. So the mobile client is modular. It has, of course, the mapping GIS piece, the assets, the work orders, and the service request, which, depending on what the field user's workflows, can be configured and modular. So in other words, they can do just work orders and have the maps if they're just doing that, or they can do just service requests, or they can do everything. And again, it's configurable based on their workflows. And everything goes through what's called the GeoKNX server. So it's communicating with the back office, Hansen, and the ESRI. The other piece of that is that it has an interface where you can configure the look and feel of the mobile client, and again, define the fields that are on, say, the work order or the asset forms. And so that's the configurable piece. And then over on the left is the GeoKNX Spatial, which is those that are managing the GIS. This is the piece that allows them to review in QA/QC any changes that happen in terms of assets or GIS records from the field. So being able to review in QA/QC if someone updates an asset, moves an asset, adds an asset, for example, they can QA/QC that and then accept it into the enterprise in their environment, being ESRI desktop. So those are the three core components to GeoKNX Mobile. So, again, this is working over the years. There's many steps, typical workflows, and really what GeoKNX Mobile, the whole reason why we built GeoKNX Mobile was to streamline the workflow in terms of entering the information, getting it into the system, and versus the paper-based workflows. So specifically, the work management, GeoKNX Mobile work management. So in Hansen, you can create your PMs, your preventative maintenance. You can create work orders within the Hansen system or service requests. And those essentially go through the GeoKNX server. So and again, in Hansen, you can either assign it to an employee or a crew. Those go through the GeoKNX server and then out to the field. And so we have customers that, in some cases, they come in the morning, download their either work orders or service requests, go out disconnected, complete their work, and then come back in, and then it essentially syncs up once they get back to the office. We have others that are actually connected, so they have perhaps air cards or have Wi-Fi hotspots where they're receiving either service requests or work orders while they're in the field. So here's a quick screenshot of the GeoKNX mobile interface. You have the map piece, and it works with your enterprise GIS, meaning your MXD or ArcMap document. So you essentially the same look and feel that you have in the office, being your labels, you can have parcels, all the base map information can be on the map, and then of course your work orders and your Hansen information come into your queue here, and those can be downloaded, and then you can bring up the work order forms, which is configurable based on what I mentioned earlier in that GeoKNX server. So you can define the fields on the form, you can reorder the fields, you can set fields to required, you can do things such as limiting the drop-down values that are in the fields and so forth to make it streamlined for the field user. Then you can locate your work orders, so one or many work orders, and it will show you, highlight on the map where those work orders are located to help you as a field user get to the locations. It also has built-in GPS, so the GPS can help with a couple things. It can help with location-based, so being able to see where you are as the field user as it relates to your work or your assets. So you pull up to a sign, you pull up to a valve or hydrant, those sort of things, you can see where you are as it relates to the assets you have in the field. The other thing that the GPS can do is actually you can use the GPS for inventorying or correcting your assets. So you can utilize a higher-end GPS receiver for more accurate GPSing of the assets in the field. So again, combining the ability to do your work management and also your asset management into one interface. So on the asset workflow, essentially that comes from the field. And again, as I mentioned, you can acquire assets, you can update assets, correct the assets, and it goes through the GeoKNX spatial piece to allow a GIS person, a GIS administrator, to QA/QC, and it'll allow them to QA/QC it, and then it goes into the enterprise GIS, whether it be your enterprise SDE or version geodatabase, and then over to Hansen. So here's a screenshot of the spatial administrator as an example. If someone in the field updates an asset, it will highlight those specific fields that were updated by the field user, and then show the original value and the new value, and give them the ability to, again, see what was updated versus, say, the field user putting it on a napkin or a piece of paper and then getting it over to GIS. Gives the ability for the field user, while they're in the trenches, so to speak, to update the asset information and really improve your data. The other piece of this is there is a configuration component to the spatial administrator that allows you to define what assets that they can collect or update. So through the configuration component, you can define okay, it's this hydrant, and they can do hydrants, but they can't do, say, valves or mains or those sort of things. So you can define which assets and what specifically they can and cannot update. And then the GeoKNX server, as I mentioned, is, again, a web-based interface that allows you to define primarily the Hansen components in terms of your work orders and service requests. And you can have different workflows and different configurations for different groups. So in other words, you could have meter configuration workflow, so you're maybe doing meter changeouts and meter related versus, say, traffic related configuration where you're doing something completely different with maybe street signs. So and when the mobile client connects to the server, it will connect to that configuration, and they'll just have their specific workflows and forms for their activities versus those that are doing, say, water-related activities. The other thing is we've done a number of things to improve the way we provide software updates. So if you have GeoKNX Mobile, you're essentially on the maintenance, which means that as we come out with enhancements to the product, in terms of, for example, we're currently going to be releasing our ESRI 10.3. So if you're under maintenance, you get that software for free under the maintenance piece, as well as we're just about to release Hansen 8.4. So as things improve, we're obviously going to be providing you with the software. So as I mentioned, part of what we do is we provide automatic software updates, meaning that you can essentially update the server, and when the client connects to the server, it refreshes the client piece. So this is really helpful for IT in terms of not having to bring the devices in, because it can essentially automatically update the software on the client. And so just a couple case studies here. So City of Kirkland, as an example, is one of our customers that I actually work with. I was a project manager, and I met with the field crews and field staff what they were doing originally. So they had paper map books, large paper map books, and they had paper work orders, and they were going out and doing a variety of things with both water and sewer and storm. So they were doing cleanings and those sort of things. And a lot of the issues, and some of these problems I already mentioned, but things such as the map books were out of date, so they would have to drive back to the office and get updated maps quite a bit because they had trouble finding assets and those sort of things. The other thing they had to do quite frequently is come in early to bring in their jobs, and then someone then so they'd enter everything in on a piece of paper and then bring it in, and then someone would then hand enter the information, and a lot of times they would maybe lose paper and that sort of thing. So what the result was essentially they had up-to-date maps and up-to-date work orders. In a lot of cases with Kirkland, what they were doing is actually initiating some work orders in the field, and then they were actually working disconnected, so then they would come back in and then they would sync up with Hansen when they got back to the office. City of Fresno is another customer, and they're primarily working with GeoKNX Mobile in their streets and traffic operations right now, but they're extending it to their water utilities. So they're doing, again, primarily work orders and service requests at the City of Fresno. And then another one is one of our Canadian customers, which is Markham. They've been using our product since 2008. They have 30, and I just recently helped them and assisted them with our latest upgrade. So we provided them with update, and so I assisted them with getting that updated to the latest with some improvements to, say, some of the workflows. So as examples, one of our recent releases has a number of things such as default values for any field to really streamline the way that, I guess, less data entry, especially when they're entering the same information. So there's a lot of things that have come out in terms of some of the enhancements that we've done. Speaking of which, here's so what's new. So we've done a number of improvements to GeoKNX Mobile. One of the things that we've done is that we support tablets, and so we now have essentially templates that you can choose from. If you're using a tablet, it has a different user interface with larger buttons, larger drop-down menus and everything, because you can maybe use your finger or a stylus versus, say, a laptop or other types of devices. So essentially picking from different templates based on the device you're using. As I mentioned, default values. So again, reducing data entry with default values and actually conditional, what are called data conditions. So as an example, if you're doing a repair activity, it may show that field and auto-populate that if you pick that sort of activity. So some conditional based on what the field user picks in terms of an activity or an asset. And just some other improvements in terms of the forms. Client bulletins are really just being able to, for someone in the office to be able to send out notifications to all the field users. Automatic updates, which I already mentioned. We already support 10.2 and Hansen 8.3, and of course Hansen 7 and older ESRI versions. I have another slide at the end that kind of goes through what's coming up in our upcoming releases. We have done a number of improvements to the Spatial Administrator, which is our desktop tools, and we also recently are now including attachments. So in other words, taking pictures and associating it to, say, a work order or service request. Okay, so now I'm going to be showing you a demonstration of GeoKNX Mobile. So give me just a second while I stop the PowerPoint here. And hopefully you see on the screen a GeoKNX Mobile interface here. So just a quick rundown on the interface. So as I mentioned, it is a modular product. So based on the modules, so if you're doing work order, service request, assets, you can turn on or off the modules. So if you're not doing service requests, you don't have to have that. Or if they're not doing asset inventory or collection, you can turn those off. But it does provide all those if you want that capability. On the right is the map itself. So again, works with your map and you can define, if you have, say, map books and what's called an MXD, you can have that for the field user. So again, with your labels and all your base information, and of course your asset layers are on the form. And then across the top are tools for interacting with the map. So zooming, your standard zooming in, panning, zooming, of course, identifying, clicking on an asset and viewing the asset information. You can look up addresses. So in other words, an address or intersection. You can find an asset. So you can look up an asset. GPS. So GPS ties to the GPS on the device. So it could be built-in GPS. It could be a USB GPS for navigation purposes. So in a second, you're going to see a little yellow crosshair, and I can zoom to that location. And it'll essentially keep the map centered on my GPS. So if you can see that little yellow, this is simulated. But the idea is I'm driving, I pull up to a location, and I can see my location. And again, when the GPS is turned on, it will, as you're moving, the map will stay centered on the GPS, and that way you can kind of see where you are around the city. And then over on the right are the four really related to the assets. So being able to acquire assets, modify assets, move, correct location, and essentially expire. So, and all of those have to go through a QA/QC process. So again, those go through the Spatial Administrator. So the edits that the field user is doing don't go directly to the enterprise, but they have to go through essentially a QA/QC process before accepting those. And of course, you can define your map the way you want based on the layers that you have at your organization. You can have multiple maps. So you could have, for example, specifically for maybe water hydrants, and then you could have another one that you're doing maybe a meter project that you can switch between. So the field user, if they're doing from the work management side, essentially in Hansen, you can create work orders in Hansen and assign those, as I mentioned, to an employee or crew. They can come in, retrieve their work orders, and the work orders come into their queue here. And this is all configurable based on what's in Hansen. So you can pick fields that are in Hansen, again, in that GeoKNX server, whether it be priority or area or district, and then you can sort based on those fields, again, that are in Hansen schedule or due date or those sort of things. You can also group the information. So if you want to group maybe by group project or as this example is by priority here. Then I can select one or many of my work orders in my list. And I can locate those work orders. So based on my selected work orders on the left, it highlights the associated assets on the map here. So this again gives me a quick view of what assets are related to the work orders. And with my asset data, so this asset data, I can see, for example, the associated asset on the map if it's labeled. So, for example, the hydrant is E3-0112, and I can see that that's that specific asset. I can pick an individual work order, and again, it'll just highlight that asset there. If I double-click on the work order, it brings up the work order form. So as I mentioned earlier, this form is configurable through our GeoKNX server. So the nice thing about this is you can really define what it is that you're wanting to collect and simplify it for the field user, giving them maybe the most important things at the top of their work order form. You can also have all your asset information and work order information on one form. So if you notice, these are basically categories, but I can categorize my fields in different groupings. So I can, if I wanted to have my asset information and work order information, this could be in separate groups, and I could collapse those or expand those based on what's important to me in the field. I can, of course, all the values are coming from Hansen with regards to work orders. So whatever you have set up in Hansen for your code definitions, you can pick from those values. They can enter their costs or essentially their resources, so their time. And again, you can define exactly what it is that they want. So if they're not doing, say, extra items or equipment, you can remove that from the interface. But for example, if I pick labor here, again, default values. So it's automatically set to pay type regular time. Again, I can change this to a different one, but I have default values set up because most of the time it's regular time. Usage is, I've got a default value as 1 hour to start, but of course I can change that if I want. Again, that's just to really save time on the data entry. I can also add, for example, my materials, which comes out of my parts and inventory. And again, based on what I'm doing, it may have automatically the stock area that I'm picking from, and then I just choose my part that I'm going to add to this work order. Again, I can add my parts, and I can add, again, the extra items or vehicles or equipment or other things that I'm working on. I can add things such as the log. So, for example, a hydrant log. And then I can also add attachments. So if I've taken a picture, I can associate that picture to the work order as well. So once I've done some work on this work order, you notice over here on the status it's been modified. I can, of course, if it's a larger project, I can come back in and add additional information or additional cost onto that. I can also enter information on multiple work orders. So in other words, if you're doing, say, let's say cleaning, or you're doing the same thing like sign inspections or something along those lines, and you do a whole street of, say, 20 assets. Well, you could select the whole list of work orders and fill all those information one time. So you could select those, basically come down here and modify, and then enter that information one time, and it'll distribute your cost across those work orders. so you don't have to necessarily fill them out individually. If you're doing especially the same sort of thing, you can just fill them out one time and then submit those, and then it'll distribute those across all those work orders. So coming back here, and then if you notice down below, I have service available down here. If it says service unavailable, what that means is I'm disconnected and I don't have connectivity, and essentially it would be queued until I get a connection. So if I, in this case, I'm going to submit this work, or I'm actually going to close the work order. So I'll close it, and then I'll go ahead and submit this. And since I have a connection, it's now gone back to Hanson. If I didn't have a connection, it would essentially be queued until I got back to the office. So that's the idea, is that, again, you fill that information out on the work order. While I'm out in the field, I can also, say if I'm doing an inspection, I can select the asset on the map. So you notice the blue highlighted hydrant there. If while I'm out in the field and I'm doing, say, a preventative maintenance, I can create a work order. It'll automatically associate to the correct asset, and then I just choose the activity that I'm going to be doing on that work order. So I click OK, and so based on this repair, it's automatically, so I've got it's assigned to Terry, and I've got a poor condition based on that condition. I can put in, of course, all my costs, but in this case, I'm just creating this work order, and I'm going to go ahead and submit that so that it goes to my supervisor. So that's just the idea of being able to, again, utilize the map to create work orders. I can also do other things such as view history. So I can view the associated history with an asset. I think there's quite a lot of history. Let me pick another asset down here. View history, get history, and what that'll do is it'll go and look at any historical work orders or activities that are on that asset that I pick on the map. So that's the work order side. Again, being able to retrieve what's in Hanson, complete that, or actually being out in the field and initiate a work order from the field. Service requests are very similar. A lot of times with service requests, though, you may not have an associated, the person that's taking the call may be a call center, and they have maybe an address, but they don't know exactly where the location is. It can go to the map based on an address or, say, a property, but they can locate, say, a service request, and very similar to a service request, they have information that they can fill out. They also have other information such as the primary caller information, so if they need to call about the service request, and they can also do attachments and those sort of things. One thing with the service request is that you can initiate a work order from this as well. So if I have this service request, I can come down here and create a work order from the selected service request, and it'll essentially be tied, the work order will be tied to the service request, and that way, you know, when you're resolving it, you can resolve through this work order. So maybe there's a leak. Again, it's a service request, someone called in, there's water spilling out on my street, and in this case, I've gone out and I'm actually going to resolve this through creating a work order on that issue that I found. So that's a service request and work orders. The other piece of this is the asset component. So in terms of assets, while I've got this hydrant selected, if I look at the asset information on this asset, perhaps it's actually a yellow hydrant, and for example, maybe it's inactive. So I can update the asset information on this, and I'll show you the back end piece here in terms of reviewing and QA/QCing this. But just remember that I changed the color and I changed the status of that asset, and then we'll see that in the back office here. So I can, as a field user, I can undo my changes, or I can go ahead and submit. I'm going to go ahead and submit this update that I made. Also, if you're out in the field, you can also collect or inventory an asset. So as an example, perhaps I'm doing a meter project. I can acquire a meter while I'm in the field. So select, and again, this could be based on my GPS location. So I'll just, this is red X here. I can be standing at the meter itself, or I can use the map to click on where the meter is, or the sign, or whatever types of assets that you can collect here. But it brings up the form. Again, it can have default values, just as I mentioned before, that they can fill out. They can have drop-down menus to fill out information, install date, and then the same concept here is I've got a new meter. I can flash, there's the meter that I just added, and then I'm going to go ahead and submit that meter. Let's see, about 20 minutes here. So again, just to recap, with GeoKNX Mobile, you can do work orders, you can do service requests, you can also do assets in the field. Now what I want to show you is, I want to show you the back office piece with regard to what I just did with the assets. So this is back in the office, and this is with ArcMap. We provide a toolbar which you, as a GIS professional, can again be connected to your enterprise GIS, and then I can come in and review what's been done by the field user. So as you recall, what I did was I updated a hydrant, and I also added a meter. So you can see there's an add, and then there's an update. So from this, I can do a variety of things. I can zoom to the feature. I can, just to make sure, I can select that feature. So it's that one. And as you recall, with the hydrant, I actually updated the color. So if I right-click and review changes, it shows me the two fields that I had updated in the field. So the status, so you can see the original value is active. The new value is inactive. The original color was red, and now it's yellow. And I can come in here and change this if I'm, again, an administrator and I find that perhaps what they corrected was incorrect. I can come in and edit that. Or if, say, I get a call and say, oops, I made a mistake or something like that, I can always come in and modify this before I accept it. But then all I have to do is really just accept that transaction. So now it's been accepted. And this could be in my enterprise GIS, which could be a version of SDE. The meter was an added meter. So again, I can come in here and zoom to the location of that meter. I can display the geometry so you can see there that's where the new meter is. And then I can then accept that transaction and then go ahead and process the transactions there. So, so now you see in my enterprise GIS, I have a new meter, and that, of course, can then get over to Hansen. So just that's just to give you an idea of how that works. And then on the server side, this is the GeoKNX mobile server. So again, this is where you can set up your various configurations. So this allows you to go right into Hansen. So for example, I have my team configuration here. I can pick work order, and here's the fields that are on the work order. So I can add, this allows me to go into Hansen, pick the fields that I want, and then I can define things, whether it's visible, read-only, required, and set a variety of things within this this interface here. So just to give you a quick rundown too, and here's some of the other things, like being able to see the client updates, defining the map data that you want. So one of the things with GeoKNX Mobile is if the server, the GIS data changes in your office, you can essentially define where that is, and then the field device, when they connect, it updates the maps that are on the field device automatically, so you don't have to manually copy maps. Because again, part of the benefit of GeoKNX Mobile is being able to be disconnected, so you can have both the maps and Hansen in the field. I won't go into all of the server configuration here, but this is just, again, this interface that I wanted to show you with regards to the GeoKNX server. All right, so this is that's the demonstration. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint here and just finish up with PowerPoint, and then, of course, open it up for questions. So give me just a second while I share my desktop again. Change that. Okay. So started here. All right. So just in summary, GeoKNX Mobile allows you to both have Hansen and GIS integrated in the field. It's a configurable product, allowing you to configure the workflows for specific groups based on, again, the activity, the assets that they're working on. Gives you the robust GIS, so it's not just a read-only map, but it's a robust GIS, but also robust Hansen, meaning it gives you all of the Hansen information in the field. And then the idea is to simplify the business processes with regards to automating what the field user is doing in the field and getting up-to-date information both for GIS as well as Hansen. So some of the things that coming soon, we are nearly done with our testing with 10.3, so we're going to be providing ESRI 10.3 here soon, and then also Hansen 8.4. So we already support 8.3 and ESRI 10.2. We're going to be supporting those two very shortly, and we'll be providing our existing customers with that software that are on, of course, Hansen 8 or 10.3. We also have our customers provide us with enhancement requests. Those enhancement requests go into essentially our queue, and we meet internally on, of course, prioritization of those, and then they come out. We're on a quarterly release cycle, so we provide GeoKNX Mobile, either enhancements to specific things. As an example, the attachments, as I mentioned, are some things that customers requested. And then, of course, when ESRI and Hansen changes, we provide those. We are partners with both Infor and ESRI, so we do have the beta software and begin testing those when we get those. So see our email and contact information. So I know this was a high level. This is kind of a high-level presentation. We can schedule some really specific demonstrations with your organization if you like some more detail. You have my email address and phone number that you can contact me, and we can be happy to schedule a demonstration with your organization with your specific needs and workflows that may be important to you. So feel free to email me or call me if you do have any questions. We do have, just as the next webinar planned, it's going to be June 23rd. The idea with this webinar is we're really going to go into best practices with regards to data maintenance and managing your GIS and Hansen and that workflow. So please mark your calendars. We will be sending out a web invite, so be on the lookout for that here soon. But we are planning on doing more of these webinars. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We appreciate your time and look forward to future opportunities.
Thanks, everybody, for your interest.